Training camp is just a couple weeks away. Is there too much pressure on Brock Purdy? And I don't know if you heard, but Deebo Samuel got a little heated during an interview. We're going to talk about all of that plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Tuesday, but I don't have my guy, So Real Sunil. I do have Ryan G. Hensley, though. What's up, Ryan? How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Internet's working. That's always a good sign.
Oh, that's a good start. I mean, internet working is always a positive.
Right. Yeah. I had a
Definitely agree that.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys tell me in the chat, maybe it's just my ears. Is he quiet to y'all, or is it just me? It could just be me.
I can turn it up.
Let's see.
How's this?
I hear you good now. I don't know. It could be on my end. I'm also sick, so I'm a little plugged up, so it could be that as well.
Sick. You sound sick, dude.
A little under the weather, but I'm doing good. All right. He's good. Everybody says he's good. So right. I guess it's me. I'll just have to do my best to listen to him. Yeah. No problem. Mike says that he's fine until he says dink and dunk.
Oh, right.
But what if he's got Oreo cookies and milk? Does that count?
You gotta dink and dunk those.
Well, Ryan, let's talk about the first thing here, man.
Yeah.
Training camp. We're just a couple weeks away. Today, we got the announcement of all of the open practices.
Mm-hmm.
What days are you going to be in attendance? I'm sure there are people there that are going to want to meet the Ryan G. Hensley. What days can we expect you to be there?
I will be there on the 30th and 31st. I would love to go more, but it's a good 2.5 hour drive from my house. I'll probably crash at my sister's pad in the East Bay. But I'll be there at least 2 days. I got a bunch of family stuff, a bunch of work stuff, so I couldn't go more, unfortunately, but I will be there on the 30th and the 31st, which is a Sunday and Monday. And I know you will be there also at that time. When are you going?
Oh, man, I'm going to be there a lot of days, brother. I'm going to be there the 30th, the 31st, the 1st. I think the 2nd, they don't have practice.
Mm-hmm.
No, wait. 30th, 31st, 1st. The 2nd, they don't have it. And then the 3rd and the 4th, I think, are the days I'm going. So I'm going to be there for 5 days.
Okay. Yeah, man, that's dope. Yeah, I'll have to get some, I'll have to follow your reports on the days I'm not there.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm excited, man. There's going to be a lot of people there. And if you're in the chat, you follow the show, either one of our shows, if you want to come say what's up, definitely do that. That is going to be the time. I would love to meet each and every one of you, if it's possible. I also don't know how easy tickets are going to be to get. I know that we have the plug as far as a season ticket holder that is going to be helping us out potentially. So that makes things a little bit easier on us. But I don't know, once it goes through the season ticket process and the season ticket holders, how many tickets are going to be available. I don't know how hard that's going to be for people. But good luck to everybody. I hope to meet as many people as possible. Now, for the 2 days that you're going to be there, what are the things that you're going to be kind of looking out for? I mean, obviously, quarterback position is going to be a big deal. Yeah. But what other things are you going to be looking out for? Just, kind of as a precursor.
I mean, to keep it real, it's going to be mostly quarterback. I'm going to be honest with you. But I'm going to be just trying to soak in everything, try to peep the scene. I consider myself very observant. So I'm going to be trying to just peep everything I see. A lot of it is, honestly, I'm going to be looking for the little things, like how people interact with each other, players on the team, coaches, etc. So I'm just really looking forward to it. But, I'll be lying if I wasn't, really just going there to see this quarterback battle. That's really what I'm looking forward to, if I'm being real.
Gut feeling. Day 1 of training camp opens up. Is Brock Purdy throwing competitively?
No, I don't think so. He'll be there doing something. I don't know if he might be doing the Jimmy Garoppolo thing, throwing on the side, but he's not going to be throwing competitively. I don't see that. I think you'll see Trey Lance taking the first snaps, and then Sam Darnold and Brandon Allen is probably what we're going to be seeing, but probably not much of Brandon Allen.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought too. I was having a conversation with a buddy before we got on, and we were just talking about training camp. He's going to be there as well. And that's my thought process. I'm not saying Brock's not going to be ready to go week 1, but I don't think day 1 training camp opens up and he's there ready to throw competitively. I think it'll be a couple weeks into camp before he's fully ready, assuming that he'll be fully ready and then, likely be the week 1 quarterback if everything's still on track. But I would be surprised if he opened up and took the first snap at training camp. I just think that might be a couple weeks too early, but we'll see. I mean,
it would be great. I would love to see Trey Lance and Brock Purdy battle it out, not Sam Darnold and Trey Lance, right? Like, I don't want to see, I could care less about Sam Darnold, but I would love to see if Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, what they both look like competing. But I don't think we're going to get that, honestly. We may not get it the whole time. He may not get 100% cleared to where he's able to do competitive throwing, 11 on 11s for a while. He may miss all of training camp, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I think it would be nice to just see it in person. Yeah. I want to see the arm in person, and especially because good friend, we'll assuming he's going to be there. I was talking to Mr. Greg Pinelli. I know a lot of people know him as well.
Yeah.
Quarterback coach for Josh Allen. Sounds like he's going to be in attendance, and it'd be nice to pick his brain and just see all the quarterbacks kind of throw side by side and get his thoughts on what he's seeing as far as live arms go and that type of stuff. So, because I know it's different. I know it's very different in person than what it is on film. And one of the things that he told me was, you can hide a weak arm on film. You definitely can. You can be fooled. And it's nice to see. And he wasn't referencing 49ers quarterbacks at all, but he was just saying in general, you can hide weak arms on film. It's nice to see it in person and kind of compare and contrast with guys that maybe he's coached and what have you. So it would be nice to see Brock Purdy there, but for sure we're going to see Trey Lance and Sam Darnold and at least be able to pick his brain a little bit on that. So that'll be fun as well.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you guys. What's weird is I feel like, we're obviously good friends, but I've never met you in real life. And there's a lot of people like that. Like even Grant, I've never met in real life. So I feel like
for sure
I know all these people, and to actually see them in real life is going to be fun.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's the thing I'm looking forward to most. There's going to be a lot of content creators there, and just people that you haven't met, and even people that, even if you don't necessarily get along with them, meeting in person is a whole different deal. It just is. I mean, it brings the human element to it, and hopefully if there's like any issues with people, they can get those things squashed at training camp. But there's going to be a lot of people there, man, a lot of content creators, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I cannot wait. In fact, that was the boost that I needed. It was like I was feeling a little under the weather, and I felt like we had good topics, and I was excited for the show. But then when we heard about training camp, like, oh yeah, here we go. This is real football. It's right around the corner. It's right there. I can almost reach out and touch it. I cannot wait for that. And I think also doing a show, I was talking with Grant as well, doing 49ers After Dark in person, I think that'll be a whole different vibe in itself. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
You guys going to be like literally side by side in the house together on that one?
I don't know how we're going to do it. I mean, technically we will each have our mics, but you need the setup that we have won't work for two different mics. So we either are going to have to share a mic, or we'll have to be, which would be super weird, right? Like we're in the same house doing a show, but not actually looking at each other. That might actually have to happen. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. I'm bringing the wife the first day, probably not the second day. So, but it'll be nice, man. Maybe we can all go out to dinner or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I heard there's a certain content creator that owes you dinner, so maybe we'll see how that plays out. Brother Bob says, if Brock Purdy was throwing normally now, we would see videos. Yeah, I don't expect that he's throwing quote unquote normally. There's a process to it. There's a ramp up process, but it also doesn't mean that he can't be ready quickly. It just depends on what's happening. But certainly he's throwing a football. How far, how much velocity, who knows? but it's definitely happening. I know that he's with his quarterback coach now, and certainly there is some work being done there. You
I mean,
know,
what's the last you've heard in regards to Brock Purdy being 100%? What is the date? Do you have something like that in your head? I know
well, I
we've
mean,
heard a
I
million
think
days,
the last that we heard was Mayoko, and it was like August 21st or something like that.
right?
But
So, I,
again, I do know that he's with his quarterback coach now, and they are throwing, and things seem to be going well. What that mean? Does that mean he's fully ready to go? No, it just means that he's still completely on track. So that's good.
right,
I mean,
right,
that's what we want to hear. The fact, again, there's two different dates. Is he ready week 1 to start as a quarterback? The answer to that could be yes, but being ready day 1 of training camp, the answer certainly could be no. Both those things can be true, and I believe that's kind of where we're headed, but we'll see.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if he's throwing 10 yards or less, they're not going to throw him out there for 11 on 11. Even
For sure.
20, they're probably not going to do that. I just don't see him being there for training camp, competing in 11 on 11s. I think that may happen during the preseason or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a real possibility that all the live training camps that fans can attend, nobody's going to see Brock Purdy throwing in a competitive environment. I think that's a real possibility,
Right.
which sucks, but we'll see.
Yeah.
49ers Daddy says, Ryan and Jesse, top tier shows. See you two at camp. I can't wait, man. Definitely come introduce yourself. No doubt about it. By the way, though, like this is the hard part with this is that you're going to come up, or not just you, but anybody's going to come up and introduce themselves as their Twitter handle or something. And I'm awful with like names and just remembering that stuff. So please don't get offended if I don't remember exactly who's who. Once I get a face and your actual name, I'll remember that. But, hey, I'm so-and-so on YouTube, or I'm so-and-so on Twitter. Just don't get offended. That's all I'm saying. It's not intentional. And I recognize you guys all in the chat, but that's a whole different thing when it's like, oh, you're meeting somebody in real life and this is what I go by on my Twitter handle. I'm going to be awful with that. I already know. So don't get offended.
Right.
Please. All right. One of the things that has happened over the last 24 hours, again, everybody's talked about it. I'm sure you've got an opinion on it. In fact, I would have loved to have heard your opinion on it, but your show ran a little bit short today. And I know you did put out a quick video on it, but talking through it is a little bit different. The Deebo Samuel interview. And what's interesting is I think most people probably didn't actually even listen to the whole interview. They just saw the clip where the questions were a little shoddy. Deebo got pissed off and he left the interview. But there was actually a good 6-7 minutes to this interview that was pretty good. And I think some good things came out of it. But just the interview as a whole, what are your thoughts on how it went down? Was there anything that you took away from the interview other than Deebo cutting it short? And just overall, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess overall the whole drama of it, to me, it just felt like two people not really good at what they're doing. I don't feel like that radio. I think some of the questions he asked were probably dumb questions, like things like he asked if Trey Lance has a future at quarterback as a starter for the 49ers. Like, what is Deebo supposed to respond to that? Like, he is not the coach. Like, what kind of response did you expect from that? So I thought that was a dumb question. I think he was kind of just looking for a quote, So I didn't really like what the radio guy was doing, to be honest. But also Deebo's got to learn how to deal with the media better, right? So I feel like there's a little bit to blame with both, but at the end of the day, Deebo is responsible for what he says and what he does. And there were a million better ways that he could have responded to those questions than just getting off the phone and giving it to his PR person, especially since he agreed to, take questions for 15 minutes. So, I don't like what the DJ or the radio guy was doing, whatever his name is. But I also think Deebo needs to learn how to deal with the media better than the way he did. Now, as far as what I took from it, I think one of the coolest things that I heard from it was him saying the same thing that we've heard from George Kittle and Kyle Shanahan, that Trey Lance has improved significantly, is what I think those were his exact words. So it's good to hear that Trey Lance continues to improve. And it's almost like with time and experience, people get better. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing what Trey Lance can do this year. But that was the main couple things that I took from it.
Yeah, he definitely showed confidence in both quarterbacks. One of the questions was, do you think Brock Purdy can repeat what he did last year? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And then, he asked about Trey Lance. The way he asked about it was definitely fishing, no doubt about it. But his response, Debo's initial response about the Trey Lance situation was very encouraging. And the way that he talked about him, how intelligent he is, how much, he's improved from last season to this season. I think all those things were encouraging. As far as the way it was handled, I think it's tough. And I want to be clear, there's two different types of interviews. There's an interview where somebody reaches out to either you or somebody on your PR team and requests an interview. And usually in those situations, a lot of times in those situations, they'll ask things like, hey, is there anything that's off limits? Do you want the questions in advance? It's very structured. And usually behind the scenes, you'll have a conversation before you actually go on air. You'll build some rapport, all those things. But then there are interviews where an athlete has a sponsorship. And that's what it was in this situation, where Debo had a sponsor. His sponsor reached out to this radio station, the CBS Sports radio station or what have you, and said, hey, we'll give you 15 minutes of Debo Samuel, but it's a part of this sponsorship. You have to mention the sponsorship. That's what it's all about. And then you have your 15 minutes with Debo. And so that's why in the beginning of the interview, if you listen to it, they're talking about the sponsorship. So we're talking about two different types of interviews here. This was not one where the interviewer reached out to Debo Samuel or the radio station reached out to Debo Samuel and requested this interview and then went rogue. This was a situation where the sponsor that Debo Samuel is paid by to sponsor this product reached out, got an interview, allowed them to promote their product, and Debo Samuel was a part of that promotion and that interview because of it. So because it was that type of interview, that's where I say, hey, Debo probably should have done a better job of just keeping his cool, even if he went Marshawn Lynch and was like, hey, I'm just here so I don't get fined, or Rasheed Wallace, hey, both teams played hard. It doesn't matter. And what you noticed was the guy kept pressing with these stupid questions. And Debo actually, to his credit, I thought did a good job of trying to keep him on track. And Debo had handed the phone over to his PR person. But Debo had done such a good job leading up to that the guy was actually starting to pivot. But Debo didn't stay on to the interview to allow him to pivot to keep it going. So I just think that in that scenario, Debo should have done a little bit better job of just forcing him to pivot, knowing that you knew right away what it was going to be. Just stay in there. It's a sponsor thing. Keep it pushing. Force him to pivot. He was doing a great job. So once you cut the interview off, that's what becomes the news. Nobody would have heard about it. Nobody would have cared about it. But the moment that you cut off the interview, now that's the big thing. And everybody has an opinion. Not that opinions matter by any means, but I just feel like that's where the mistake was made by Debo. But certainly the guy had an agenda. From what I understand, he went to Temple, which means he's probably a Philadelphia Eagles fan. And he was trying to push some sort of narrative. Sucks. But because the interview was requested by the sponsor that Debo is paid by, I think you should probably stick it out and just run through it. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, and he was there. From my understanding, it was about a charity that he's doing in Las Vegas, and it's for kids. So hats off to Debo for doing that for the kids, and for going on there and plugging what he was doing. And look, I've had my run-ins with athletes. I don't know if you guys remember Anthony Davis, the right tackle for the 49ers.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I asked him like the biggest softball questions you could possibly ask a guy, and he blew up on me for no reason at all. It was a big thing at the time. So I understand sometimes athletes aren't reasonable, but I also think the questioning was just unnecessary. And he seems like a little arrogant, the guy that was asking him questions. So I think often, like most conflicts, there's fault on both sides.
Yep. I agree. I think that's important, is that I definitely don't think it was all Debo. And Frankly, if I was going to place blame, I would place it on the interviewer. Like he clearly had an agenda, but that doesn't mean that Debo couldn't have handled things a little bit better, especially being the reason why he was there. That's all I'm going to say. But if I had to put full blame on somebody, it would have been the interviewer. However, Debo in that situation, I believe, needed to handle the situation a little bit better. And I thought he was doing it. Like I said, I thought he was doing a great job. He actually had answered the question right so many times that the guy was about to pivot. But Debo at that point was like, I'm already done. Like, here, you handle it, PR person. Like, I'm done with this. So you could tell the irritation was there for sure. And there was a comment that I had on the screen initially where somebody made mention that Debo, might be a little bit socially awkward or what have you. I think that much is clear. It's not easy to express yourself all the time. And I think a lot of these athletes are thrown into situations where they have mics in front of their face and they're asked all these tough questions in emotional situations a lot of the time. And not everybody can articulate and express themselves in an open manner. And I definitely get that from Debo Samuel. It's not a knock on Debo. That's just the way he is. And so for him, I could see maybe he gets easily flustered and is like, I'm just not dealing with it. Like, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to do the interview stuff anyways. If it was my choice, I would do none of it, but I have to. It's a part of my profession. Definitely not my favorite thing to do. I'm out. So I get that as well, for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do have fault. To me, there is fault from Devo, but he's got to learn how to respond to this stuff. It's not going to end anytime soon for him. So he's got to work on improving there. But I also think there was fault from the guy. I wouldn't have conducted the interview that way. So Debo, you should probably come on Jesse's show or my show next time. We'll hook you up. Probably not as much viewership, but we'll definitely take it a little easier on you.
Yeah, for sure. Ready for whatever. The reason that it's a topic is because Debo dipped. That's the whole point. This wouldn't be a topic if Debo had just hung in there. It would have been nothing. Now, everybody has heard the interview. And like I said, 99% of the people that have heard the interview actually have only heard the two really crappy questions and the lead up to it. They didn't hear the first 4.5 minutes or so, which I thought was actually pretty decent. They've just heard this, and now that's the highlight. So it sucks, but it is what it is. Not a big deal at the end of the day, but it was definitely worth discussing. Now, here's a topic that I know was brought up yesterday on your show with Grant. It was something that I had text you earlier. I didn't even realize you guys were about to go live, so I'm glad that you had it before you did.
Thanks for the topic, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But I was just looking at it, and Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy were very similar in the 5 full games they played in the regular season with CMC. Mm-hmm. And I think obviously the Miami game happened, but that wasn't a full game for Brock. I was looking at the Chiefs game through the Saints game for Jimmy Garoppolo, 5 games, and then 5 regular season games for Brock, where he played start to finish with CMC. Very similar numbers. Jimmy Garoppolo had a 71% completion percentage. Brock Purdy had 69% completion percentage. Jimmy Garoppolo was averaging 245 passing yards per game. Brock Purdy, 219 passing yards per game. Jimmy Garoppolo was averaging 2 touchdowns total per game. Brock Purdy was averaging 2.4 touchdowns total per game. And they were both averaging 0.4 turnovers, which for Jimmy Garoppolo is incredible in itself. In fact, he went 4 straight games after the Chiefs game with 0 turnovers. First time in his career he had gone at least 3. I think the CMC effect certainly was there. But were you surprised a little bit? And record-wise, Jimmy Garoppolo was 4-1 in those games. Brock Purdy was 5-0. The one loss for Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers came against the eventual world champions. No surprise there. Were you surprised a little bit by these numbers?
I was, because, I was. And the reason why is because to me, Brock Purdy, and I still feel this way, Brock Purdy is an improvement over Jimmy Garoppolo, in my opinion. Now, I will say I think Jimmy Garoppolo is the best quarterback that the 49ers have had in regards to getting the ball out quick. If the first read is open, he's going to get the ball out quick and he's going to be accurate. I think Jimmy's better than that than Brock is. Brock is more mobile and he extends plays and he's better at going through his progressions. But when it's all said and done, their numbers are very similar. Now, Jimmy had more yards, about 26 more yards per game. Brock had more touchdowns. Now, Brock was in better field position. The defense was hitting on all cylinders at that time when Brock stepped in. So that may have something to do with why he was able to score more. But bottom line, their numbers are very similar. However, you get Brock Purdy at $900,000 versus what Jimmy Garoppolo costs. I'll take it every single day of the week. But yeah, I mean, this is why I'm very hesitant to call Brock Purdy a franchise quarterback. I mean, if you look back at my takes on my show or Grant's show, I've been saying this the whole time. A lot of people were calling him Joe Montana and Tom Brady, and I'm just like, let's pump the brakes. He's on one of the best rosters in the NFL, the best weapons. Kyle's dialing up the most wide open, shortest passes for the guy. Now, maybe he can become elite, but I need to see a lot more before I crown him that guy, because he's honestly putting up some very similar numbers to what Jimmy Garoppolo was. And Jimmy's just not good enough. So Brock's got to do even more than what Jimmy was able to do.
Yeah, real quick, Brother Bob, I think I read your super chat. Wasn't that the first super chat I read? Am I tripping? I swear I read it. Let's see. It's right here. Yeah. If Brock Purdy was throwing normally now, we would see the videos. Posted it, Brother Bob. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. I think that's it. And I also think that certainly if Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo are playing at a similar level, Brock Purdy being a 7th round pick, Mr. Irrelevant, the thought is there's room for improvement. Most definitely. I think all those things can be true. But I also think that there's a big segment of this fan base that genuinely believes that what Brock Purdy was doing was something that Jimmy would have never been able to do. And I think that's where the mistake is made. I think Jimmy Garoppolo at that stage in his career, again, small sample size. We have no idea what it would have looked like in the playoffs. Of course, if you go look at Brock Purdy's playoff numbers, it was amazing. But we never saw it with Jimmy Garoppolo and CMC. I just think that CMC is that much of a difference maker. Now, maybe Brock Purdy without CMC can overcome some things better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that's also true. But we won't necessarily know that, not at least right away. And I think the slight of Jimmy G of things that he just couldn't do, once we saw CMC there, he was a completely different player as far as his efficiency went. And we see the numbers. They certainly were the best of his career. He was the most efficient he had ever been. He was the best at protecting the ball that he had ever been. And I threw up a video on the channel last night. A lot of people were confused by the video, but it was a video, and I titled it something like 5 throws that Brock Purdy made that Jimmy Garoppolo never could. For those of you that didn't watch, you can go check it out. I'll explain it to you so you get it. But they were zoomed out videos, so you couldn't necessarily right away tell who it was. They were all throws from Jimmy Garoppolo made last year in 2 separate games. So they were very easy to find. It's not like I had to go search for Jimmy Garoppolo's best plays. No, I watched 2 games of all 22 and was like, damn, there's good throws in here.
Yeah.
Let's make a fun video out of it. And the point is, in coupling that with the stats, is Jimmy Garoppolo is actually pretty decent. That's really all it is. It's not, hey, he's better than Brock, or I wouldn't prefer Brock. I certainly would prefer Brock Purdy, especially with the upside. I think it's very clear that Jimmy Garoppolo is who he was for the most part. Certainly he could have played better with CMC, and we saw that, but I don't necessarily think he's particularly a good quarterback. I don't know what Brock Purdy is. Yes, the upside is there. Certainly, presumably he would get better, but we thought that about Jimmy in 2017 as well. We just don't know. But Jimmy Garoppolo actually played pretty decent with CMC, and I think that much is clear, and it should be acknowledged for sure.
When you said the upside is there, let me ask you what you mean by that, because so one thing I've said is I think Brock Purdy is closer to his ceiling than Trey Lance is by far. I didn't say he reached his ceiling. There's some things he's going to learn. Yeah. But when you say the upside is there, what kind of upside do you see for Brock Purdy? What can he improve?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, anytime that you're a rookie, I would think the thought is you're going to improve. I mean, that was the first time you stepped on a field, just knowing the offense better, knowing what you can get away with. having rapport with your teammates. I think those things naturally happen over time. But for him, I think the biggest thing that he can improve on, a lot of people say he's an elite processor, and I believe he's a very good processor. And if we're talking about a rookie level, certainly elite for a rookie. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But he's not close to an elite processor. There is a lot of film out there that you can see that he's missing wide open reads. Now, luckily for him, he's very mobile. He's quick. A lot of times he turns those missed reads into great plays. The George Kittle touchdown in the back of the end zone, I believe against Seattle, is one that comes to mind. He misses the first read. Clear, wide open touchdown. Makes something happen. Finds George Kittle. Everybody oohs and ahs. But the reality of the situation is that's one of those plays that I guarantee Kyle Shanahan was like, hey, great play. If you hit the read the first time, things would have been a lot easier. You got to be better at that. And so those are things that I'm looking at. So I think he can certainly improve in his processing, and stepping up in the pocket has to improve. If he never learns to step up in the pocket, that's a death sentence. Brock Purdy will never be a long-term solid quarterback in this league if he doesn't learn to step up in the pocket with consistency. I believe all of that can be learned, most certainly. And so I definitely think there's room for upside. Now, as far as, hey, if there was a ceiling for Trey Lance and a ceiling for Brock Purdy, I don't think there's any doubt that the ceiling for Trey Lance is much higher. There's just certain things that they can all learn whatever, but you can't teach taller, faster, stronger, cannon arm. There's just certain things that physically Brock Purdy could never get. But, and I've heard you say this a million times, and I agree with that, that doesn't mean that Trey Lance is going to reach those potentials. Correct. If he does, certainly a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. If he doesn't and Brock Purdy reaches his potentials, Brock Purdy certainly could be a better quarterback than Trey Lance. So I see where you're coming from. I want to acknowledge that, but there's definitely things that Brock Purdy can get better at. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting to see if it happens, right? Like sometimes there's this thing called a sophomore slump, and then you're coming off a UCL injury. So it'll be interesting to see if those things can happen. And let's say he starts week 1. Is he going to have enough time to develop those things, since he's really right now just focused on getting his arm up to speed? So expecting him to show improvement in week 1 when he's just getting back to 100% with his arm, I don't know if that's realistic. Now, he may, if he starts and he's able to, be healthy enough to play week 1, we might see that improvement towards the end of the season. But I could see a decline, at least in the beginning, from Brock Purdy before we see him come back up.
Definitely agree with that. And we're going to talk about expectations on Brock here in a minute and why they might be too high. But I think all those things can be true. And that's why I try to preach patience as much as possible, and saying, give all quarterbacks, all players really, but especially the quarterback position, give them 3 years. And not just 3 years in the league, but give them 3 years where they're playing 8 to 10 plus games for 3 seasons before you fully start to judge these guys. Because it is entirely possible that Brock Purdy, who played very well last year, to your point, rehabbed all offseason, is thrown into a crappy situation to start week 1. It looks ugly for 3 or 4 games. Then what is the narrative? Are we all of a sudden going to believe that Brock Purdy's not good? Was Jesse right the whole time? And man, he sucked and all these other things, the way that people think that we believe about Brock Purdy. Like, is that going to be the narrative? Or are we going to have patience and say, hold on, he had really good games his first year.
Yeah.
It started out a little rough. Let's see this thing through. Let's give it time. Let's give him through this year and into next year, and let's see where he's at before we rush to judgment. I think if we were to hang on every game, every throw, every play, the way that a lot of people would prefer that we did when we make these judgments on players, we would be wrong a lot. And so, to your point, let's just pump the brakes. We don't know. And I don't think we're going to know after this year either, good or bad from Brock Purdy. I'm not so sure we're going to know fully after this year either. Let's give it time. And I think it sucks because we want to know who the franchise quarterback is. Now, I would certainly feel better if Brock Purdy was the week 1 starter again the following season, that we saw at some point this trajectory where he's showing improvement, but it might be rough. And if it is, do we just write him off completely? Do we forget about the 8 games from last season? I don't know. I can see judgment being thrown his way, one way or another, good or bad. And we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'll save my response for when we talk about expectations, because I agree with what you're saying there.
Most definitely. Let's get to these super chats real quick. Sean says Darnold dealing with ghosts at Kittle's house.
I gotta watch that. I've heard about that. I haven't seen it. I gotta watch it.
I've heard about it as well. I haven't watched it, but now I'm intrigued. Brother Bob says, okay, I said I bet that radio ass would not do that in person with Debo, but over the radio, he's a warrior. Daps Ryan and Nails. Okay, so Brock Purdy equals Jimmy G 2.0. No, definitely. I don't think he would have done that in person either. Again, usually when you're in person, that humanizes things, but you never know. I mean, maybe he's got some Jim Rome in him. You remember Jim Rome in that interview with Jim Everett?
Yeah.
You never know. Who knows? But I agree. Probably wouldn't. Is he Jimmy G 2.0? This is hard. I think what we saw last year was potentially that, but again, the upside is much higher, and they are different players. How they get it done is different, but the result with CMC is very similar. So if we're talking about the result with CMC in the lineup, is it similar to Jimmy? Sure. How he went about getting it done is completely different. They're completely different players. There is reason to be excited about Brock Purdy and his athleticism that you're just not going to get from Jimmy G. And again, we would probably all agree that Jimmy G has reached his ceiling. We know what that looks like. And Brock Purdy has not. Now, much like Trey Lance, just because Brock Purdy has a ceiling, it also doesn't mean that he's going to reach his ceiling. We don't know. That's why I say be patient. Let's give it time and we'll see.
You know what's funny? The comparison when we're talking about like we often say, there's things that Trey Lance has that there's nothing that Brock Purdy can do to learn.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that Brock Purdy has that there's nothing that Jimmy Garoppolo can do to learn, right? Jimmy's not going to have that quick burst and that mobility no matter what he tries. So he'll never be on Brock's level in that regard. However, I think Brock Purdy can learn to be that quick release guy that Jimmy was. So if he adds that to his game, plus with his, short area quickness, then he could be even better. And I would take Brock Purdy over Jimmy Garoppolo 10 times out of 10 right now. So I think he's better.
Most definitely. And I also think it's fair to say, if there's one thing that Brock Purdy has that Trey Lance also will probably never learn, it would be that short area quickness. You either have that or you don't.
Right.
You can get better at it. I'm not saying Trey Lance can't improve, but athletes are built differently. I'll give you an example. Fighters, they can learn to have more power, but some people just have that touch of death. Some people are just Mike Tyson and they're born with it. They'll kill anybody with one shot on the chin. Yes, you can learn to have knockout power, but it doesn't mean you're going to have knockout power to that ability. Some people are just born with that. And I think when you talk about quickness of an athlete, that fast twitch muscle, you either have that or you don't. Brock Purdy has that. I don't think Trey Lance will ever have that, but they're very, very different. Trey Lance also is somebody that can rush for 500 yards in this league, and Brock Purdy will never probably rush for 100 yards. So very, very different in that facet of their game. But there is the one thing that I think Brock Purdy has that even Trey Lance will never get, and that is that quick twitch, short area burst. I just don't think that's something that you can really develop.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate statement. Yeah.
49ers throwback says, good show with Vish, Jesse. He's talking about a show last week. He said the Eagles won't win the Super Bowl according to Ryan. Keep the receipts. Thanks for your show as always. Yeah. Did you say that?
I said it just because I was annoyed with the Eagles reporter. There's an Eagles reporter talking trash about the Niners. I said it. Honestly, you guys aren't going to like this. but I don't really think the Eagles or the Niners are going to win the Super Bowl this year. But I said it about the Eagles because I was getting annoyed with them, and I don't think they're going to win it. I just don't. I think the AFC is going to win again this year. Unfortunately, that's how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's if I was a betting man, I think the safe money's on the AFC, no doubt about it. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But
You never know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
You never know. You're right. You're right about that. Silverado Kev, what's up, man? He says, what's good? Last Second Sports and Ryan. What's good with you, Silverado Kev? Good to see you in the chat. He said, let Brock fully heal without rushing him and allow Trey to show what he can do. If Trey balls out, Brock is great insurance. If Trey balls out, well, Brock is quarterback one. Yeah, I think ideally that would be great. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. But I also want to say this. If Brock Purdy starts week one, I don't think that they're quote unquote rushing him back. I don't think Brock and his team will allow that to happen. And I think that the 49ers probably feel comfortable enough, at least for a couple weeks, even if Brock Purdy's not available, to roll with either Trey Lance or Sam Darnold. So I don't think he'll be rushed back. I just think that he'll either be back or he won't. And my bet is that he's probably back week one.
I'm betting the other way. I think I think Trey Lance starts week one. I think here's my I know I'm probably the only one saying this right now, but I really think that Kyle Shanahan wants to see more from Trey Lance than all these national reports we've heard. I think Kyle Shanahan still wants to be right about the guy that he spent 3 first-round picks to draft, and I think this is his best and possibly his last opportunity to use the excuse of Brock Purdy's injury to justify, hey, man, we're not going to rush Brock Purdy. We're going to start Trey Lance, and it's really probably what he wants. Brock Purdy forced Kyle Shanahan's hand here to start him. He, by the way he played. But I feel like Kyle Shanahan wants to be right about about Trey Lance, and I think we're going to see Trey Lance week one. So we'll see, man. I got a bet with 187 here in the chat about it, so we'll see.
No, I I definitely know you have a bet with 187. I was wondering where you were leaning, because it definitely does seem to be trending towards Brock Purdy. You would agree with that, right? Like whether you believe that he does or not, it seems like it's trending that way, at least publicly. Yay or nay?
So my thoughts on Brock Purdy, if Brock Purdy was 100% healthy and able to practice fully for 2 to 3 weeks, I think he's the starter. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think they're going to be like, okay, we got one week with Brock. He's the starter. If Trey's playing good in camp, which I expect him to, I think they're going to say, hey, Brock's just getting back. Trey's done a good job this preseason, so we're going to roll with Trey while Brock continues to ramp up and get ready. I think they're going to use this opportunity as an excuse to see Trey Lance. That's what my gut is telling me. So
I actually agree with the first half of that, which is they are going to want to see it. I think Kyle Shanahan said it and completely. Yes, you should want to see him in a competitive environment. Do not just throw him out there week one. Right. Don't let him not take any preseason snaps or no snaps versus the first team defense and just be like, oh, you're healthy, so let's go week one. My initial thought going into this was Brock Purdy would be fully cleared, but wouldn't have that ramp up period. Basically what you're saying now is exactly what I had said early on. I don't think he's going to have enough time to have that ramp up period and be ready to go. He'll be cleared, but he'll need a few weeks of competitive reps before they want him to play. I still stand by that portion that they're going to want those competitive reps. It just seems to me like those competitive reps might actually happen towards the final 10 days or so of August, which probably would be enough for him to start week one, assuming he looks good and they feel comfortable with where he's at. If he looks awful, can't protect himself, and there's something crazy, certainly he wouldn't start. But I also don't think if that were the case, that we would necessarily hear that he's taking these competitive reps either.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing, about in regards to my opinion, if you're one of those guys in the comments or one of those people that thinks Trey Lance is just awful, right? I've seen 187 think Trey Lance is awful. He's a bust, right? Why wouldn't you want to throw him out there week 1 so we can finally know if he is in fact a bust. If you think he's not good, he's not going to take Brock Purdy's spot. So let's see what he can do week 1. Let's let Brock Purdy get those practice reps, because honestly, if you're a big Brock Purdy fan, I would be worried about him coming out week 1, coming off of this injury without a ton of practice time, without a training camp, without all these things that are, in my opinion, necessary to be successful as a quarterback in the NFL. If you're a big Brock Purdy fan, you should be concerned that Brock Purdy is going to be rushed out week 1, and you should want to see Trey Lance go out there and be the bust that you think he is.
Yeah, I think probably the flip side is like, well, we don't want to give up any games, and we think Trey Lance sucks. Also, getting back to the 3-year thing.
Yeah.
Even if we saw 4 games of Trey Lance this year, I really don't care what it looks like. Whether it looks really good and they bench him, or it looks really bad and they bench him, I'm still not going to have a full, clear picture of who Trey Lance is. Again, I think a lot of other people will feel like they do. A lot of people think they already have a clear picture of who they think Brock and Trey Lance is. I need to see more. I mean, even if we got 4 games, yeah, you would have a better idea, at least where Trey Lance is today versus maybe week 1 last year. That's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we know where he's going to be. Even if those 4 games are great, that's not enough to say he's going to be great.
The thing for me is I don't think it matters which one of these quarterbacks starts week 1. I think the records are going to be pretty much the same. If you look back last year, I mean, which game did Brock Purdy put the team on his shoulders and carry them? There wasn't one, right? He just let the weapons do the thing. Trey Lance could do the same thing.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the original argument that I had months ago, which is if I say the end result is X,
right?
Say the 49ers make the NFC Championship and lose there again, but I don't tell you who the quarterback is. Do you believe it matters? If I said Trey Lance is the quarterback and they lose in the NFC Championship, would you be surprised by that? Would you be surprised if I said Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy were the quarterback and they lost in the NFC Championship? I think most people, if you're really thinking about this and how good the team is, could be like, yeah, I could see a scenario where maybe Sam Darnold plays his best football and it's good enough for a year, or Trey Lance gets better throughout the year, or Brock Purdy, we already saw it. I think you could really talk yourself into all 3 of those scenarios. So I don't know that it matters really at all as far as how far they necessarily go this year. Now, that doesn't mean that you figured out a solution to your long-term quarterback issue. But if you're just talking about one season, they make it to the NFC Championship, meh. I mean, any one of them. I could see a real scenario where any of them make it. So I agree with that.
Yeah.
Official B&A Music says, Doug Flutie comes to mind when I think of Brock Purdy, undersized playmaking, Pro Bowl level quarterback with a lot of college tape and whose main weakness is physical traits. Yeah, I mean, Brock's definitely bigger than Doug, no doubt about it. But as far as like short area quickness, certainly. I mean, Doug Flutie had that. I mean, he had Doug Flutie magic. You know, he definitely had a short area burst. Doug Flutie also, I would imagine, in even today's game, could probably rush for 300 to 500 yards. So I think a little bit different athlete, but also smaller than Brock Purdy. But I definitely get where you're going, no doubt about it. I think that's a fair comparison as far as maybe an athletic profile. I think it's pretty close. Ellis says, I would like to see Trey Lance start week 1. Yeah, I mean, but another point that Ryan's made, and I agree with, is I don't know if the quarterback that starts week 1 is necessarily at an advantage. I think they could be at a disadvantage. I think Trey Lance could be at a disadvantage. I think Brock Purdy, coming off of a major injury, even if he has a couple weeks to ramp up, without an offseason against the Steelers on the road, could be at a disadvantage, and it could look a little weird. So, I don't know. I don't think it necessarily matters. I think there's a possibility where all 3 quarterbacks, or certainly Trey and Brock, could both play at some point this season. So it's just patience. We'll see how the season plays out. Frank Tom Ocean says, I don't care who the quarterback is. I just want the 49ers to win a Super Bowl so I can get a CMC jersey with the DB patch. Laugh out loud. Hey, I'm with you. I've said it a million times. If they would have won a Super Bowl last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, and people know I'm not the biggest Jimmy fan, erect a statue of that dude and put it outside Levi Stadium, give him a lifetime contract for all I care. just
Right.
get number 6. So I don't care who the quarterback is either, as long as they're winning a Super Bowl. Now, much like 2021, I do care who the quarterback is if they don't win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
In 2021, I thought they should have started Trey Lance and gone through the growing pains very early on in the process and gotten rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. And a lot of people said, well, they made the right decision because they made an NFC championship. I completely disagree with that. If you didn't win a Super Bowl, which is what the goal was when you were trying to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, then it wasn't good enough to not see what Trey Lance had, put him out there his rookie year and go through those growing pains. So if Brock Purdy's the starter and he doesn't show a lot of improvement and they lose in the NFC championship game, I'm going to be pissed again. So it all depends on the result. If they do win it, I don't care who the quarterback is. Now, also, if Brock Purdy does show that improvement and keeps on that trajectory and they lose in the NFC championship game, I'm not going to put it on Brock. I wouldn't be mad that he played then as long as he's showing he's getting better. But if he looks roughly the same or maybe even takes a little bit of a backslide and we still never got to see Trey Lance and they lose in the NFC championship, yeah, I'll be pretty upset about that. No doubt about it. So
Right. Yeah.
I think it all depends on how it actually goes down. So we'll see. All right. Let's talk about Brock Purdy and the pressure that potentially could be on him. And we did talk about it a little bit in the last topic, but there certainly is a lot of pressure. Let's just look at things logically here for a second. There's a lot of these executive lists that have been coming out on ESPN as far as positional players and where they rank. So far, they've been going through defense. As it stands right now, NFL execs have Nick Bosa is the number 1 edge rusher in the league. Javon Hargrave is the number 5 interior defensive lineman in the league. Fred Warner is the number 1 linebacker in the league. CBS Sports has CMC as the number 1 running back in the league. PFF has Trent Williams as the number 1 O lineman in the league. PFN and PFF respectively have Shanahan ranked as the 5th and 4th best head coach in the league. And we know the 49ers had the best defense in 2022. And if we really look at things, remove the quarterback position, the 49ers probably have a top 3 offensive weaponry in the league. So the question is, if they don't win a Super Bowl, probably you look at the quarterback position as to why. Is that too much pressure on Brock Purdy in your opinion?
I mean, so I think I see it differently. I think with Brock Purdy, he's already exceeded expectations. I think most of the pressure lies on Trey Lance. I think Brock Purdy's already exceeded any expectations that have been put out, right? Nobody expected Brock Purdy to do what he's done. And to me, it's expectations are what creates pressure. With Trey Lance, the expectations are really high because they spent 3 first-round draft picks on the guy. With Brock Purdy, he was a surprise. I don't think there's much pressure on Brock Purdy, if I'm being honest. I think he's probably not affected by pressure anyways, based on what I've seen from Brock Purdy. I think the expectations that he's going to be ready as quick as people want are a little high, but I don't think he looks at that as pressure necessarily. I think when it comes to who's has the most pressure, I think it's Trey Lance by a mile.
That's interesting. I didn't expect you to take it that direction. Well, the reason I would say Brock Purdy has a lot of pressure, I mean, certainly, again, if the conversation is, did Brock Purdy exceed expectations? He's already outplayed his contract. If he never played another snap, he's outplayed his contract.
Right.
But you have a big portion of this fan base who thinks a lot like 187 and says, Super Bowl or bust with Purdy. Trey starts, I don't know if we make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if the 49ers don't win a Super Bowl, and that is certainly the expectation with this roster, that most people would point, much like we have with Jimmy Garoppolo when he was the quarterback, would point to the quarterback position as the reason why. And even 49er players came out and said, hey, if Brock Purdy was healthy, we would have won a Super Bowl already. Like, that's the feeling in the locker room. So the thought would be, if Brock Purdy's healthy this year, we're going to win a Super Bowl. And I just look at that again, remove Trey Lance from the situation. And I've been a big advocate of if you believe Brock Purdy's your guy, much like I said for Trey Lance, when you thought he was your guy, they should have removed Jimmy Garoppolo from the situation. And I say the same thing about Brock Purdy. Remove Trey Lance from the situation. If Brock Purdy's your guy, go all in with Brock Purdy. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Brock Purdy from the standpoint that people think he's the second coming of Joe Montana or whoever, and that if he plays, they should win a Super Bowl. And going into your second year off of an injury without having an offseason, I think that's a lot of pressure, man. That's a lot of pressure. I'm not saying he can't live up to it. I'm not saying if they don't win a Super Bowl, obviously hindsight's 2020. Maybe we look at it and say, they were decimated with injury or something crazy happened again.
Yeah.
But I think going into it, just looking at this roster, looking at the coaching staff, if you were to say the 49ers didn't win a Super Bowl, we're not going to tell you the reason why. Brock Purdy played all season. I think most of us would say, well, Brock Purdy probably didn't live up to expectation at that point. That would be the reason why. And I think that is an unfair expectation to put on his shoulders, in my opinion.
So, yeah, I think that expectation that Brock Purdy should win a Super Bowl this year is unfair. I think that part I agree with. I think both quarterbacks, I think, honestly, whether it's Trey Lance or Brock Purdy, I think both of them are going to go in the playoffs, maybe far in the playoffs, maybe even to the Super Bowl. But I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl. I don't think either one of them are going to do that this year. I think that's unrealistic expectations of Brock Purdy and Trey Lance based on how much we've seen of them. So, I mean, again, that's my thoughts on it. Now, if people think he's Joe Montana based on what he did last year, then they're going to think he's Joe Montana if he goes out and does the exact same thing he did last year, right? If he continues to do what he did last year this year, which I think is totally possible, 212 yards a game, right? He's just using his weapon, letting them run after the catch. He's totally capable of doing that again. But I don't think that's enough to beat a guy like Patrick Mahomes. And I don't think Trey Lance can beat a Patrick Mahomes in his first year. Like, say he starts this year and he develops all year long. Is he really going to beat Patrick Mahomes in his first full season? I don't see that either, to be honest with you. So, but the problem is for Trey Lance, he seems to be on such a microscope. And to me, that's the pressure. Brock Purdy doesn't seem to be under this microscope like Trey Lance. To me, everything Brock Purdy does, people love, right? It can be, he can throw for 180 yards in a game and people think he's the next Tom Brady based on what we've seen from Twitter. Whereas Trey Lance can't make mistakes or people want to write him off. So maybe I'm not agreeing with what you mean by pressure. I think the expectations are unfair. But I don't think Brock Purdy feels this pressure. I think if Brock Purdy goes and does what he did last year and they lose in the playoffs, he's going to feel fine. Whereas Trey Lance has to really show out in order to overcome what Brock Purdy did, if that makes sense. So, like, when we're talking about pressure on Brock, I don't look like it's too much pressure on Brock because I think Trey Lance has way more pressure, if I'm being honest.
No, that's totally fair. And maybe it's semantics. I could see what you're saying. Definitely. The expectation is too high on Brock, but maybe Brock doesn't necessarily feel that pressure. I think that's totally fair. Judd, you may not say that. Like, you may think about it logically. I saw your comment where you're like, I would never say that. I encourage you to read through some of the YouTube comments that myself or Ryan get and or Twitter comments and get back to me.
Yeah, Judd's always...
It's out there a lot, I promise.
I've seen
a lot
Judd
more
before.
than it should be.
He's always coming at me in the comments. But the reality is, Judd, I've seen multiple people compare him to Joe Montana,
and Tom Brady, by the way.
And Tom Brady.
And Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So it's yes, I know it sounds crazy. It certainly is crazy, but also true. So it's just the reality of the situation. So anyways, all right. New power rankings came out. And the 49ers were 5th in these power rankings. And I think power rankings are always interesting because it's like, what do you think of the team right now? And power rankings come out really after each week in the regular season. And depending on how well the team played and the opponent that they played and how they played against them, power rankings can fluctuate drastically throughout the season. But now that we're just a couple weeks away from training camp, knowing this new power rankings came out, the 49ers were 5th. The Chiefs were 1. The Eagles were 2. The Bills were 3. The Bengals were 4. And the 49ers 5th. Do you agree or disagree, and why? So Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Bengals, 49ers.
That's tough, man. I think it's fair. It doesn't strike me as crazy. I think the 49ers have topped 1 or 2 rosters in the NFL, minus an elite offensive line and a quarterback.
Minus the 2 most important positions. Yes, I agree.
Right. Whereas those teams have that guy. They have that quarterback in place. So I think it's fair where they're ranked, to be honest with you. It doesn't make me, oh, that's crazy, right? I don't feel that way when I hear that. I think that's fair. I think AFC has it sewn up right now, man. And it's because of the quarterback. All the elite quarterbacks, or most of the elite quarterbacks, are in the AFC. And as your quarterback goes, so does the team. It's just how it is, man. This is a quarterback-driven league. And until we figure that out, now, Brock Purdy or Trey Lance may surprise me and just become that guy this year. And if that happens, then I think if Brock Purdy or Trey Lance were just a top 10 type, top 12 guy, if they were number 10, Niners should win multiple Super Bowls over the next 5 years. They should win 2 or 3 Super Bowls over the next 5 years. That's how good their roster is. But the quarterback position is still a major question.
Uzi Grod says, Jesse, please read this. Brock is too small. Please stop. He's small. Subscriber always. Appreciate you for being a subscriber. Appreciate you for tuning in. I don't know if I agree that he's too small. I definitely think there's limitations, and we talked about that, but I don't know if he's quote unquote too small. He'll just have to make up with it with his mind, and maybe he can do that. Maybe he can't. We'll see.
I mean, Russell Wilson won a Super Bowl. He's about the same size as Brock Purdy. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
Russell Wilson's thicker, though. I think Russell Wilson to me and Jalen Hurts are like listed as the same size as Brock Purdy, but there's a clear physical difference.
Yeah, physical. I mean, Drew Brees. I mean, it's possible.
Drew Brees, though, yes,
but just ideally, you want a guy with more size. Doesn't mean he can't succeed because of his size.
I also think, I agree with that. I mean, Kyler Murray, obviously a different athlete. Drew Brees, when people talk about Drew Brees, people forget how good of an athlete Drew Brees was as well. Drew Brees could easily dunk a basketball. Like, he's an athletic dude. So let's not just act as if Drew Brees had no athleticism to him. I mean, he was an athlete for sure, no doubt about it. And the most precise passer I have ever seen. I mean, him and Steve Young to me are like guys that I remember when I think of precision passing, like those are the standard.
Can Brock Purdy dunk a basketball, Jesse? That's the question.
I don't know. But he does have a good 10-yard split. So, I mean, he's athletic as well. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to take away from Brock's athleticism, but I don't know if he can dunk a basketball. I guess that's but I also wouldn't put it past him. I bet there's a possibility he certainly could dunk a basketball. But the question is can he reach top 3 ever precision passing? I don't know. That's a pretty high, lofty expectation. And I think that's what it would take for him to be a consistent top 10 quarterback in this league. I really do, with some of the physical limitations he has.
I mean, when you compare Drew Brees had that elite athleticism. Russell Wilson had that powerful, deep ball. He's a better runner as far as in front of the line of scrimmage. Yeah. So there are advantages, but again, small, yes. Too small to win a Super Bowl. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
So as far as the power rankings go, my preseason pick to win the Super Bowl is the Bengals. They've got them number 4 on this list, so I would agree with the Bengals. Although I did pick the 49ers to beat the Bengals when they play in the regular season. So, but I've got the Bengals as winning the Super Bowl. Chiefs and Eagles just were in the Super Bowl, so they make sense. I'm a huge Josh Allen guy, but I also recognize, or at least in my opinion, the Bills roster as a whole is not near the level of the 49ers. And I believe the roster can overcome potentially a Josh Allen, potentially, if they were to meet up, I would move the 49ers ahead of the Bills. I would have the Bills number 5 probably on this list. And I think the Bills are also going to struggle to make the playoffs. They've got a tough division, man. Miami, obviously, the Patriots are going to beat some teams. They still might end up with Hopkins. They've got a great coach. Maybe Mac Jones bounces back and turns into a decent quarterback. We'll see. This is the third year for him. We're going to know basically who Mac Jones is after this year. So they're going to win some games. The Jets obviously getting Aaron Rodgers, and then the Miami Dolphins are extremely competitive with Tua playing, and they got better as well. So that division is going to be tough. We're going to know a lot about the Buffalo Bills through their division this year, a lot more than we probably knew last year. Health will be a big part of it. They were extremely banged up towards the end of the year. Getting Von Miller back will be huge for them. We'll see how it plays out, but I look at the Bills roster, and there's things to be desired there.
Let me ask you a question about the Bills. Two questions. The first one is, did your opinion of Josh Allen change at all last year?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
All right. Because I mine did slightly. Like he went down a little bit to me. Like I still think he's a great quarterback, obviously. But he did seem to he wasn't as smooth, wasn't as efficient if we saw the year prior. So
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Two reasons. And one is we talk about UCL injuries. Let's not forget he almost lost his UCL as well.
True.
Against the Jets. I mean, he got his arm ripped off nearly. Now he's physically bigger, maybe a little luckier. I think luck definitely plays into it. But they wanted him to sit for a couple weeks, and he decided not to sit. He played through it. And I think there's certainly something that plays into it as far as that goes. And also, when you look at what he is asked to do, I broke this down because I did a Josh Allen, Joe Burrow comparison on my second channel. Josh Allen is worth more to his offense than any quarterback in the league by a wide margin. It's something like 78% of the touchdowns over the last 3 seasons have gone through Josh Allen, which is higher than any quarterback in the NFL, about 7% higher than Patrick Mahomes, about 4% higher than Joe Burrow. And I just think what he's asked to do, again, the best way to look at quarterbacks, and I've also heard you talk about this, is if we were to have the same system, the same weapons, insert this quarterback, what does it look like?
Yeah.
You put Josh Allen in a Bengals offense, it might be 6,000 passing yards. I am not joking. He is that good. I think he's that elite and that talented. So for me, my thought of Josh Allen didn't take a back step, but I could understand why some people's maybe would based off of what we saw. And also, I think what we saw was a bit overblown. People are like, oh God, he turned into a turnover machine. It was the worst year he's had in 3 seasons. Well, when you go look at the turnovers, it was still the same amount as Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow was applauded for having the best season of his career and protected the football. And Josh Allen's out here playing rinky-dink backyard football and throwing a ton of interceptions and being loosey-goosey with the ball, but their turnovers were basically identical. So I don't know. I think a lot of that is perception versus reality as well.
Yeah. I have, just so you know, this is off subject, but I mean, it's kind of on subject. I have Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs winning another Super Bowl back-to-back this year. I really believe they're that good. I know you predicted the Bengals, but I got the Chiefs doing it again.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to how much can Patrick Mahomes overcome is really, I mean, that's like the fun trick now is like, how many good players can we strip away from this roster and still win a Super Bowl? How good is Patrick Mahomes? And I think doubting Patrick Mahomes at this point would be crazy. But that roster, people talk about how talented that roster is. I don't see it personally. You take Patrick Mahomes off it, I'm like, yeah, there's some cool pieces. Don't get me wrong. They're not without talent at all. But I don't look at them and go, oh, man, that's an elite roster. No, it's elite because Patrick Mahomes is on the roster. Kelsey's really good. Certainly there are some good players, but where's the great receiving core? Where's the elite running back? Where they've lost their biggest name offensive lineman. I don't know that they lost their best offensive lineman, but at least their biggest name, their left tackle. I don't know. We'll see how much he can overcome. I think I think that ask is even more this year than it was last year. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, do you look at that roster and think it's elite? I just don't see it.
Well, what I see is a team. I see a team that won the Super Bowl last year with a lot of rookies in key positions. And now those guys are going to be second-year players. So that's what makes me think that there could be a jump from that roster. They could be better this year than they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, they have the best player at the most important position, and they have probably the best coach in football. And so those things certainly can overcome a lot. It was enough to overcome and win a Super Bowl last year. I don't think anybody would look at them and go player for player and say they were better than the Eagles by any means. I think the Eagles, and that's what made it tough. A lot of people picked the Eagles to win the Super Bowl based off the roster, but reality was Patrick Mahomes he's just too good. And Andy Reid is just too good. Can they be too good again? I don't know. We'll see. Did I lose you, Ryan? You definitely look frozen. I think we might have lost Ryan. Let me do this real quick. Let me do this before it gets weird on the screen. Do this. We'll do this. Kick him out. And I'll make him come back. If he comes back, great. If he doesn't, no big deal. What do you think, chat? I mean, do you think that the Chiefs have an elite roster? I don't. They've got some good players, but player for player versus the 49ers, the Bengals, the Eagles, I just don't think they hold the candle. Patrick Mahomes is just that good. It's really what it is. Andy Reid's just that good. Brother Bob says Larry will say Brock Purdy equals Josh Allen. Like he said, Brock Purdy equals Hurts. Yeah, that actually happened here on my channel where he said Brock Purdy equals Hurts. I understood where he was coming from for a lot of it because they are similar people as far as kind of what they had to go through, what they had to prove, stature. I don't think athletically he meant they were the same, but they're not. And certainly he's not Josh Allen. So I'm going to give Larry a pass on that one. Dabada says, Ryan, which one, Brock Purdy or Christian Ponder? Ryan's not here to answer it, so I will answer it. It's Christian Ponder, not close. Just kidding. Bam Bam says, Josh Allen fell last year because the hits have begun to take effect. It will continue the more he gets hit. Bills need a running game. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that's also what frustrates me with Kyle Shanahan and the way he talks about Trey Lance is he kept comparing him to Josh Allen. First of all, completely different players and athletes. Second of all, there was actually a play, I think it was Josh Allen's third year in the league. I'd have to go back and figure that out, where it was basically a keeper slightly to the right, similar to what Trey Lance did. And Joey Bosa snatched his ankle. You look at the play, it is identical almost to what happened with Trey Lance. Now, unfortunately for Trey Lance, his leg snapped. Josh Allen's did not, but it looked like it should have. It looked like it could have. So this thought that Shanahan is, they do it in Buffalo. Maybe you should watch football and I'm smart and you're not, is super frustrating because if you watch football, you would see that Josh Allen takes unnecessary hits and actually had his ankle snatched on the same exact play, the same exact way that Trey Lance did. It just didn't give out all the way, fortunately for him. But the play exists. I posted it on Twitter multiple times. And there's another play where he gets knocked clean out by a Patriots defensive back while he's running. So this thought that, we should use Trey Lance like they use Josh Allen because the result long-term is good. I mean, yeah, Josh Allen's a hell of an individual player, but I think most people who watch Josh Allen play have this same sentiment where it's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't run him as much. Maybe you should ask other players around him to do a little bit more. I think anybody who's watching Josh Allen would see that. But, hey, what do we know? His internet is incredible today. and decided it wanted to go out earlier on his show and went out again here. So we'll see if he makes it back. He did pop backstage. There he is. Let's see. See if he makes it. It's all good, dude. Don't worry about it. You're good.
I don't know how long it's going to last, man. I apologize, guys. I got the hard wire coming in. I called him to bring it out, but I'm paying for the best internet there is, man, but it's kicking my butt today.
Well, Mike Monahan says that your internet dinked you. So there you go.
Yeah, if it happens again, man, I'm going to let you just wrap it up on your own, buddy.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that you have dink and dunk internet.
That's
agree.
True. I agree too. Yeah, 100%.
All right. It's the last topic anyways. And if you can't make it through, no big deal. But I'll let you go first in case your internet does give out on you. Right. Which 49ers player do you think can make their first Pro Bowl this year? And maybe you have a couple players, but who comes to mind?
First one that comes to mind has got to be Dre Greenlaw. I should have made it last year. I think he can make it this year. That's the guy. If I had to put money on it, I think he's going to make his first Pro Bowl this year. Dre Greenlaw. Second one's going to be Charvarius Ward, man. I think he might have a big year this year, comfortable in the system, and I think Wilkes is going to dial him up. So those are my two guys that I think will make their first Pro Bowl this year.
You stole my Charvarius Ward. That was my number one guy. I agree. I think Charvarius Ward is primed to make a Pro Bowl. We were talking about, or I had briefly mentioned, these NFL executive lists where they're ranking players at each position. Right now they're going through the defense. They just did defensive backs, I think, today. It's on ESPN. I think it might be ESPN Plus. But either way, Charvarius Ward was nowhere on that list. He wasn't even an honorable mention. Now, he did get a vote to be on the list, so that was out there, but that puts him at like 18 to 20 as far as defensive backs go or corners go. I think Charvarius Ward, you look at the actual numbers the last 2 years, has been elite. He's in his prime. I expect, especially with Wilkes, that he can take even a step forward. I think Charvarius Ward is primed to be a Pro Bowler this year. I really believe that. And I also don't think that there is a set of corners in the NFC that are just so good that they should be Pro Bowlers for sure, no matter what. So
agreed.
I think Charvarius Ward certainly can make. I think Dre Greenlaw is a good one too. That was a good one.
Yeah, he should have made it last year. Honestly, I hate the way he played. I think he was definitely could have been made it last year. So good to me, it'd be Greenlaw or Ward. Those are my easy ones. Now, long shots, one of these quarterbacks. Long shot, one of these damn quarterbacks might be your Pro Bowl, and it could be Brock Purdy or Trey Lance.
Brock Purdy was my number 2 guy. If he starts this year, you look at the NFC, and it could be Trey Lance. I'm just assuming that Brock Purdy's going to start week 1, and the last thing I want to do is predict injury on anybody, so I'm going to assume health. I wouldn't be shocked if there was an injury by any means, but I'm just going to presume health for whoever starts week 1 and that they're going to start all year. If that is the case, I think Brock Purdy definitely could make a Pro Bowl because the NFC is just weak, man. And outside of Jalen Hurts, I mean, maybe Dak. I don't think there's a clear-cut number 2 quarterback. And Pro Bowl is not all pro. Very different. Jared Goff's made a couple Pro Bowls. So you can have a really good year and be a Pro Bowler. I think certainly I could see a path where Brock Purdy makes a Pro Bowl as well. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And I honestly think Trey Lance could. I think if either one of these quarterbacks plays a full season, they have a definite possibility of making a Pro Bowl this year.
Yeah, most definitely. I see some other really good ones in here. I see Case 49 saying Ayuk. Yeah, I'd love to see Ayuk. Saw a couple people, Mike saying Lenore, Moody, Pro Bowl. That's a possibility as well. If Moody's has a really good rookie season as a kicker, certainly could make the Pro Bowl. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Stafford, yes, recycled for sure. So yeah, I certainly Jair Brown, yeah, maybe. There's a lot of really good secondary players on this team. We talk about the elite guys. Isaiah Oliver certainly could make a Pro Bowl. Yeah. Drake Jackson, if he comes out with the other 3 guys next to him, the Armstead, who's really good, obviously Bosa and Hargrave, certainly you could see a path where he gets 12 to 15 sacks, goes crazy, just based off of getting cleanup sacks, and all of a sudden he's a Pro Bowler. So may not be likely, but you could see a path where this could happen. Couple of these offensive linemen, if Aaron Banks made a Pro Bowl, would you be shocked? He had a really good season last year. He might take a step forward. So I certainly could see a path for a lot of these guys to make a Pro Bowl. I don't know. I'm going to draw the line here. I don't know if there's a path for Kinlaw.
That would be nuts. That would be nuts.
Maybe that would be nuts. That would be nuts. But I'm going to draw the line there. Sorry, Kinlaw. Don't hate me. Yeah. All right.
Well, listen. He's going to come up to you at training camp.
Oh, God.
Knock your hat off.
I guess I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks. Maybe I should chill. Yeah. Either way, Ryan, I appreciate you coming on. I'm glad the internet made it through most of the show for sure. You and I will be back together again in 2 weeks. I think 2 or 3 weeks. I think when training camp starts, August, we're going to start going full time on Tuesdays before my show with Sunil. So it'll be a couple more weeks before we see you for sure again. We'll see. Maybe something comes up, but for sure we'll see Ryan full time here on Last Second Sports in just a few weeks as we start to enter training camp and ultimately the NFL season. Ryan, thank you for joining me. If you're not subscribed to his channel, make sure you do so. Ryan Hensley, you can check him out. And obviously do the same here. Lots of training camp stuff coming your way. Call-in show tomorrow before 49ers After Dark, so tune in there. And until tomorrow, hold on. Right at the last second. Josh Allen, Bam Bam says, Josh Allen fell last year because of the, I think we already got this one. We're good to go. I just didn't remove it. Already got this one. We're good to go. All right. Until tomorrow. Peace.